Okay, hello everyone. Today we're going to be going over Chapter 8, Nutrition and Global Health. And again, my name is Dr. Jody Sutherland, and I'm going through the chapter with you and discussing key points that will be important for you to have an understanding. Again, as always, make sure you read through the learning objectives, as these will be important as you prepare for your examination and also to help focus your reading. And for some reason it's not letting me highlight today, so let's see here. Work with it here for a second. This is an important topic, as nutrition is one of the key indicators of health outcomes. If we don't have proper nutrition, it's going to be very difficult for us to be healthy, whether that means we don't get enough to eat or the types of food that we eat are not beneficial for us. Well, folks, unfortunately, I will not be able to highlight, but I can at least draw your attention with these markers here as to where I'm talking. But for some reason, the document's not letting me highlight today. So poor nutrition can lead to a lot of health risks, and we'll see that here on the section on the importance of nutrition. Again, good nutrition is the cornerstone of good health, and you'll be able to understand that as you read throughout this chapter. We can see here some of the factors that nutrition is associated with. We know that it's fundamental to growth and development throughout the life course, not just among young children, but throughout the life course, but is particularly important early in life. It's also important to our physical and mental development, and again, our health as adults as well. Poor nutrition could lead to reduced immunity to diseases, increased susceptibility to disease and illness, impaired physical and mental development, as well as reduced productivity. We can also see here that it's important for academic performance for school-age children. This is something that we are keenly aware of here in the United States, and particularly here in Tennessee through our adoption of the coordinated school health model. Nutrition is one of those components. We understand that if a child has an empty tummy, it's going to be difficult for them to learn and concentrate. Just to give you a few statistics on this, 66 million school-age children attend classes hungry. So 66 million children every day are attending class hungry, with 23 million of these living in Africa alone. So almost 1/3 of those that are hungry, those children, are in Africa. The World Food Program estimates that it would cost approximately $3.2 billion for us investment in order to reach all of these children. So we can see that nutrition is keenly important to the health and well-being of the child. In addition, again, we talked about the fact that it's not just important for children, but for individuals of all age groups. And once again, we see individuals that have higher risk, oftentimes poor women, and again, our children that live in low-income countries, and particularly in a couple of countries that we'll talk about throughout this chapter, South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. We can see here in the next statement that nutrition is actually the leading risk factor for the loss of health in these nations. And again, this has a huge impact, not just within the family, but within the community and society overall. If we lose individuals of working age, or if they're not as productive as they could be, again, that impacts the economy. So it's this cycle of risk that leads again to low productivity that impacts the economy. We can see here that there are about 3 million child deaths annually. That amounts to approximately 8,000 nutrition-related child deaths in the world every day, and that's a staggering statistic for us to think about. Worldwide, approximately 842 million people do not have enough to eat. Now, we have made some improvements in this. We've seen this rate fall by 17% since 1990. However, it's important to note that we still have so much work to do. Now, Asia has the highest number, the overall number of individuals, about 500 million, but Sub-Saharan Africa actually has the highest percentage because it's not as densely populated. So about 24.8%, almost a quarter of the hungry, live in Sub-Saharan Africa alone. I'm going to direct you to some terms that will be important for you to know. Here on the next here you'll see terms such as malnutrition, undernourished, underweight, and overweight. So it'll be important for you to have an idea of those, and then you can refer to Table 8.3. So we'll scroll down there quickly. Make sure you have an understanding of these. These will probably be on your exam, but they're important for you to understand as you read this chapter. A lot of us are familiar with body mass index here in the United States, but there will be a lot of additional terms that you may not be as familiar with. Things such as stunting, and it's important to note that stunting, again, has a huge impact on productivity. And currently, approximately 1 in 4 children are stunted, and in the developing country, that can be as high as 1 in 3 that are stunted. Now, when we think about body mass index, you may think, well, why are we talking about underweight, but now we're talking about overweight and obesity? Contrary to what you may think, we're seeing a dramatic rise in obesity rates across the world. And we're seeing that occur younger and younger. Approximately 44 million children under age 5 are overweight. And again, these global trends in this prevalence of overweight, and overweight specifically among children, is rising. Between 2000 and 2012, this prevalence increased from 34 to 44 million. Again, children under age of 5 who are overweight. And we're seeing increasing trends in Africa and Asia, as well as in the developed world. So again, you may be, or in high-income countries, so you may be surprised, again, to see these dramatic rates of obesity in Asia and African communities, but a lot of this has to do with the adoption of this Western lifestyle. The types of foods that they're eating, physical inactivity, smoking, and other factors. We see that the highest rate of overweight children is actually in Southern Africa. 18% of children under the age of 5 are overweight. Then in Central Asia, we see that 12%, that's the next highest. And then here in Southern America, we see 7%. So again, just take a look at those terms. They'll be important for you as you study this chapter. As you study read through the chapter, make sure you understand the determinants of nutritional status. And we'll talk about things that are immediate, those that are underlying causes, and also those that are basic causes. And you can see here in the first paragraph is going to talk about the immediate causes of malnutrition. And then here, using this UNICEF framework, they talk about the underlying causes of malnutrition. And then We get into factors such as here on the next page, which are key and things that we talk about all the time here in public health, the social determinants. And these are the basic causes. We can see things such as socioeconomic status, family income, knowledge or health literacy about one's health and nutritional practices, and then the amount of control that a person actually has over their life. And you may think, well, I don't understand how all of this relates. But again, when we think about the social determinants, they have a huge impact on all health outcomes. 3/4 of all the hungry actually live in rural communities, and this may be surprising. It may be counterintuitive because rural communities have access, or we would think, to land. But oftentimes they have no alternative source for income and employment. So again, we go back to socioeconomic status. So they have no alternative for a source of income or employment, so they depend on these farming practices. They depend on agriculture. Oftentimes we see that it's these small farmers who live in areas where they're prone to drought or prone to flooding. And so again, they lose their crops. And they also may be landless and depend on someone else, such as a tenant farmer. That may be a term you're familiar with. So they have to live on someone else's land and farm their property for them. But we are seeing urban rise in hunger as well. And as our cities begin to grow, we'll probably see this continue to increase and possibly at some point overtake the percentage of hungry that actually live in rural communities. I want to draw your attention quickly here to the nutritional needs. And again, make sure you read through this. When we think about proper nutrition, we often think about, the basic food groups, but it's important for us to note that there are essential macronutrients that we need to have, such as vitamin A, iron, iodine, and zinc, and they play an important role in our nutritional status, as well as our overall health, and again, in our development and our ability to thrive. I'm just going to touch on a couple of these briefly. You can see here as you read through the chapter, again, make sure you note the table and understand where each of these sources of micronutrients come from as far as the food groups. Make sure you have an understanding of that, and also it'll help you understand why some individuals don't have access to these specific macronutrients, or micronutrients, excuse me. Let's talk just quickly here about vitamin A. We see that it's important for proper functioning of the immune system and to the child's growth. In fact, it's important for eye health in particular, and it's the leading cause of preventable childhood blindness. So it's important for children to have adequate vitamin A levels. We see here again how community factors or physical factors may impact our health. Individuals in mountainous regions often don't get sufficient iodine because they don't have access to the seafood like those who live on more coastal areas. And these can lead to intellectual disabilities and other health problems. We can see here with iron, it's important as well, and 50% of pregnant women don't get sufficient iron. So it's really important for pregnant women to have sufficient levels of iron in their systems, and this deficiency actually accounts for 315,000 deaths are associated from these hemorrhages that the women experience at childbirth. Now, when we think about the fact that women are often the primary food producers in the family, this has a huge impact, particularly in low-income communities. This loss of the mom, the mother, that's a huge loss of role in that family, again, as the primary food producer. So it leaves a huge void in these families. As you read through here, it's important for you to take note of the nutritional needs throughout the life cycle. Again, we often think about what the child needs, but we can see that it's important during pregnancy, from childhood to adolescence, and on through adulthood and old age. We talked a little bit already about lack of micronutrients among women during pregnancy, but it's important to note that maternal undernutrition leads to, again, poor fetal development as well as higher risk of pregnancy complications, as we've already discussed. So this would be a target population that we would want to try to intervene with. Make sure you read through each of these sections on infancy and young childhood, adolescence, as well as adulthood and old age. And before we move on, when we think about this from a U.S. standpoint, when we think about hunger in the United States and poverty, if we use traditional measures, oftentimes children are oftentimes the ones we think about who live in higher poverty families and also have higher rates of hunger. But if we use non-traditional measures of poverty, which is being advocated heavily, we see that actually older adults are more oftentimes likely to live in poverty and to be undernourished. And a lot of this has to do with the increasing health expenditures that these individuals have, as well as declines in their overall income. Take note of the nutritional status of the world. As I mentioned earlier, there has been some progress in reducing the global burden of hunger worldwide, but again, there is still a lot of work for us to do. We can see that there has also been important progress in addressing micronutrient deficiency as well. However, as we've already noted, there's still so much work that we need to be doing. Particularly when we consider, again, about 842 million, or the book says 800 million people are malnourished to some degree. 30% of children are moderately or severely stunted. And again, that when we think about the large share of this occurs among women and children, we can see how the productivity and the sustainability or the stability of a society can definitely be challenged. Next, you'll read through some statistics on undernutrition, as well as low birth weight and vitamin A deficiency. And we've talked about some of these already, but we'll see that again, Southern Asia or Southeast Asia, as well as Southern Africa, generally have the highest proportion of individuals living in these communities. I'll draw your attention quickly to Table 8.6, and here we can again see the prevalence of underweight in low and middle income countries. And it's estimated that there's about 99 million individuals under 5 years old worldwide that are underweight. And again, we can see that the trend continues to decrease, but it's at a slow pace, so we have a lot to do. Approximately 67% of these individuals, children, live in Asia, whereas 29% live in Africa. So again, we can see these communities that are most impacted. Make sure you pay particular attention to nutrition, health, and economic development, as these are interrelated. If an individual is hungry, they cannot reach their full potential. They're not going to perform as well in school. They're less likely to attend college or some type of trade school. So there's a loss of intellectual capital in those communities, which has then a direct impact on the economic development of those nations. And then lastly, I'm going to skip over to the future challenges that we face. Sorry about that, folks. So the future challenges, make sure you read through these. These are important for us to understand from a public health perspective where we can make an impact. But hunger kills more people every year than AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. And that may be surprising. Again, let me restate that. Hunger kills more people every year than AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis combined. What can we do about this? How can we address this? Particularly when we think about that millions and millions of tons of food are never eaten. Or oftentimes a lot of these communities actually produce food, but it's all exported into other countries. So how can we address these issues? Also, there's lack of investment in a lot of nations in agriculture, lack of agriculture infrastructure such as safe roads or adequate roads, irrigation, etc. So this makes the transport of foods very costly. And then these individuals also depend on unreliable water sources. So again, their crops are oftentimes lost. When we couple this with climate and weather, we know that there's been so many natural disasters that individuals throughout the world have faced, whether it be typhoons or tsunamis or earthquakes, in addition to increasing war and displacement. Again, we can see that we have a lot of challenges to try to address as we try to make an impact on the hunger and nutritional status of individuals throughout the nations. As you conclude your read through the chapter, make sure you look at the study questions, as they will be helpful and insightful. Thank you.